Welcome in, everybody. Glad you are here. This is HR Lunch Bunch. My name is Deborah Jeffries, and I work at HR Answers and have for a long time. So I host the HR Lunch Bunch group, and we are approaching in October of this year will be 16 years of doing this, which is quite a feat, actually. We are joined here by Marjorie Dudley, and I'll let her do some formal introductions. And we've got a live group of people here. And if you'd like to have your cameras on, we would welcome the chance to be able to see you live and in person, as it were. And our conversation today is around culture, conscious culture in our workplace. And Marjorie and I have known each other for a number of years. Marjorie actually used to live here in the great state of Oregon. Just had to put that out there. The great state of Oregon. She's decided to move away. We won't hold that against her. But like so many things, people keep connections even when we move away, which is part of what this is all about. And with HR Lunch Bunch, for those of you, I don't know if we have some new people to Lunch Bunch. You need to let me know by using the icons. You can put the little hand up and let me know if this is your first time. We meet the first Wednesday of every month from noon to 1, and we have a conversation. So good, I'm seeing some, oh good, we do have some newbies. So this is intended to be a conversation. So as an HR professional for many, 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 many years, one of the things that I know is we take our job seriously. We don't always have to take ourselves seriously. We don't always get out of the office enough. And that's one of the reasons why this whole thing was started, was to be able to network, to learn, but to learn also from each other. So one of the things that I have asked our facilitators, our guests, to do is come, let's talk about a topic that's germane to HR and to our organizations, things that we might be dealing with, working on, maybe even struggling with, things that we've had maybe some successes with, but also what questions do we have? Questions for each other, and sharing maybe our own pitfalls, how we got to where we're getting. We can ask each other questions, share our answers and observations with each other. So it isn't all about, someone sharing all their information and kind of doing a data dump on us. Marjorie does have a PowerPoint. She's more than happy to share. This is being recorded, so you can come back and watch later if you want to. We'll send out the PowerPoint after the program, so that you have that for your notes if you'd like. But really, this is intended to be a conversation and a dialogue between HR professionals. And so that's really what this is all about. So please feel free to unmute yourself. We've got the chat box open. You can utilize that too. I'm just glad that you're here. Marjorie, I'm glad you're here because she's got a wealth of information and she's dabbled in a variety of things. And we've kept our conversation going in an off and on over the years. And she just brings energy to any conversation. So Marjorie, let's get started, shall we?
Thank you. That was such a wonderful introduction. And yeah, we've known each other a long time. I used to serve, I think we served on the SHRM board together. Is that what you're remembering?
We did.
Full disclosure, I am not an HR professional. So I am a sales and leadership and business coach. I work with leadership teams, of which you all are a part of. And one of the things that I know is germane, and it really depends on your organization. Some of you might be in organizations that are very forward thinking, and HR is very actively involved in the big picture leadership stuff. And some of you might be in organizations where you feel like sometimes you're kind of having to like fight to be seen as more than just compliance. And so with that, this is a topic I'm extremely passionate about, which is company culture. And you all have an incredible opportunity before you to be integral, if you're not already, or if you're not feeling like you are already, integral in consciously creating company culture, or leading from the front on company culture. So I am going to share my screen. I do have a PowerPoint, but as Deborah shared, this isn't a Marge dump. This is I didn't come up with a fun acronym because I happen to love acronyms, but this is not a dump for me to just, tell you, but I do hope that the framework that we cover here will facilitate giving you tools, ideas, maybe confidence, all the things where you really get to be the champion of curating the kind of culture that will build your company with the right values in mind. So hopefully, hand up, thumbs up. Hopefully that's good here. And just unmute yourself at any time if you have a question or if you have something to add. I would love for this to be a group dialogue. So I'm with a group called Southwestern Consulting. I've been in the coaching, speaking, and training space for over a decade now. And this is the culmination of working with a lot of organizations, with a lot of leadership individuals and a lot of leadership teams. So, the first question, feel free to use your chat box as well if you're feeling bashful. But the first question is why? Why on earth do we want to consciously create culture? Why do we want to think about it in those terms? And join in at any point, but I'll impart a couple thoughts. Maybe you've had them. Maybe they'll be, the kicking off of a conversation you start with your fellow leaders. First is excellence is never an accident. It's never an accident. And one of my favorite quotes, I can't even count the number of times that I've shared this quote with leaders. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And this is where all you fine leaders really come in, because there's a finance department and an ops department, and they're getting very strategic on us. And strategy is important. But if we don't have the right culture in our organization, if that's really fulfilling that strategy, it doesn't matter how good your strategy is. Your culture will always run away with the show. So some of you probably read Peter Drucker before. He's fascinating. He's kind of the godfather of a lot of organizational behavior type concepts. Does anybody have any additional, like, why or even what would be helpful in terms of culture in your organization? What would you like to build? What are you seeing that needs maybe needs some tweaking? I just did a presentation with an electric company a couple hours earlier today. I'm in Florida, like Deborah said, and the leader spoke of his team as all Ferraris, which is so cool. I love hearing leaders speak so highly of their people, but even Ferraris need tune-ups once in a while.
I was going to say, zoom, zoom.
Right.
Well, Trudy said in the chat box, we want to shape culture so that everyone experiences our work organization in a life-giving way.
Yes.
And then we had another one, to assist employee engagement.
I love both of those. If you've been in HR, if you've been in business, if you've been in the workforce for more than probably 3 years, 5 years, there have been a few changes in the last little bit here, haven't there? Deborah and I were just talking about all the really cool things that we now get to do because Zoom is in all of our vernacular now. Culture is happening no matter what. Culture is forming no matter what. If we're not intentionally forming it, though, it could be going in directions that we don't love. So my big compelling case, just like almost any area of our life, right? If we're not intentional about our finances, they tend to go in a direction that maybe isn't most ideal for our future. Same thing with our marriages and relationships. Same thing with our health. Company culture is in the same vernacular. If we're not intentionally forming it, it's unintentionally being formed for us. But then it becomes a how question. Okay, so yes, Marge, we need to lead on company culture and we need to design it on purpose. what the heck does that mean and how the heck do I do it? And so this is where my fun little acronym comes into play. So firstly, think of it as a daily practice. And daily will give you a fun little outline, but it really is a daily practice. Culture is not a set it and forget it type of concept. It is something that we are all building together intentionally if we want it to be great. And I'd like you to think about some of the organizations that you know of. Maybe your organization falls in that list. Maybe there's other organizations that you can think of. And I want you to think about what is it about their culture that you really admire? What are some things that would be defined, this is our D in daily for you, as a great culture? I have a client who is, they're really rapidly expanding in the car wash market. He has other business ventures as well, but they've got like 28 washes in the works, and they are growing so quickly. If you've ever been in an organization that grows really quickly, maybe you can relate to this, that you can sometimes be hiring so fast that one person changes the culture radically. So he and I spend a lot of our conversations on defining what are the markers of a great culture from where you sit. The second piece is to assess, and I'll dig in on all these. I actually have little 4 sub bullet points for each one, but assessing where our culture is today. If we don't have a grasp on where we want to go and a grasp on where we are, it's really challenging to make conscious progress towards that. I'll pause in case anybody has anything they want to interject yet. The third step is we need to identify what are the elements that we need to take action on. Everything great, again, excellence isn't an accident. Everything great happens because we choose to plant a seed. We choose to take action. We choose to cultivate that ground and develop that into something wonderful. Again, you can't farm and garden by accident and have the kind of crop you want to have. So what are the actions, identifying the actions that it will take for us to get there? Of course, leading, and you all are at the forefront of leadership in your organization. You talk to every new person coming in. You get to talk to people on the daily about what's working, what isn't. You get to be involved in the leadership conversations and hear the challenges from all the other heads of department. You guys have a massively impactful role, and leadership is it's a big job, right? There's a lot of people that get to benefit from the leadership that you provide. But with that also sometimes comes the not as fun side, which is yanking the culture cancers. We'll dig on what that specifically means, but this is how you can start to practice culture daily. Let's hit on these, and again, jump in, and maybe we'll have or take ourselves off mute or put in the chat box for any additional ideas that you have for each of the categories. But first, with defining, what are the principles on which your organization rises and falls? What are the principles? What are the things that we do, not just say? Now, yes, we want to say them, but when things get tough, principles show up way more than our words, or show up in our actions way more than in our words. Same thing with values. So principles and values probably overlap quite a bit. Values are often a single word that we embody, whereas principles have to do with, different convictions that we have. We have beliefs as a company as well. And these three form in our work. When I work with leaders on this, we have a tool that we call creating your company creed. So you've probably all worked for companies or work with companies right now that have a mission statement and a vision statement, right? What we're aspiring to be, why we're here in this line of work, doing what we do every day. If the mission and the vision are the why, or excuse me, the why and the what, the creed is really the how. So for example, in our company, Southwestern Consulting, we have things like seeing people for not just who they are, but who they can become, being for what's right and not who's right, being practitioners of everything we preach. Those are a few of our creed points. And why I share those is because when we have those things clearly articulated and a difficult leadership decision comes to light, maybe there's a star performer in their role, but man, they're not demonstrating being for what's right. It makes the leadership decision a lot easier because we've defined those bumper, those bowling bumpers, if you will, that this is what we are and this is what we do. And then the last element of this is our vision. So not just your individual vision, though I would encourage all of you to have a vision that encapsulates where you want to go in your role, like what really gets you excited, but really where's the vision for the company, and what sorts of principles, values, and beliefs do we need if we're going to excel towards that vision? Does anybody have any thoughts on that, or any additional elements in the define portion of the daily practice? Or how are we doing that in our organizations? How are we defining our principles, values, beliefs, and vision presently? Here's some other food for thought while we're waiting either for someone to come off mute or add something to the chat. And no pressure if you don't want to. If you're just here to listen, that's okay too. But I would challenge you, ask around in the coming weeks who actually knows the company's mission, vision, values. Who knows it? Because a lot of times we have it. They probably got it in their hire paperwork. Maybe it's buried deep somewhere in the company website. But if we only have it defined somewhere hidden, and we're not consciously defining it on a daily basis, it's really hard to live something that we don't truly know exists. So do a little experiment in the coming days or weeks. When you bump into someone, ask them, hey, do you know what our company mission statement is? Do you know what our company's values are? And see what they say. This can be one area that we can really drive culture in our organization, is just actually to more regularly promote what we already say we stand for. I find a lot of companies don't actually, at the lower levels of employee, like maybe the owner or the whoever, the leadership team who created the mission statement, they know it, some of them at least. But does the person who got hired 3 years ago and has just been, coming in to do their work or working from home, do they know it? And what is the cost of having a mission statement that our whole company doesn't know and embody?
It's interesting when you share this, that one of the things that I think about, so I want to make sure. Trudy wrote, do you have experience of identifying when two stated values or beliefs are actually in tension with each other, as in tension with each other? Oh, that's okay, Trudy, that's a good question. So let's answer that question. One of the things I was going to share is that I talk a lot in some of my training about core values. What are the core values of the organization? And a lot of times people will put the values like on the wall, right? We might have a banner, or we might have put them on some plexi of some sort or another. But how are we? Yeah, and that's great. But how are we living the values? So to your point, do we know them? Can we recite them? Who's sharing them? How often are they shared? And how are we living them? And when I do, because I do a lot of work around supervisory training. So I ask managers and supervisors, like, how are you living the core values? How are you
Mhm.
reinforcing those, like in setting expectations for performance and for behavior? And then when
Mhm.
we talk about performance reviews, how are those showing up in examples when you're rating any of your employees on their performance or their behaviors, the things that we're rating them on? Are they living the core values, the
Mhm.
principles? How are they doing? How are employees doing that each and every kind of quote day on the daily of
Yeah.
sorts? And so if you don't have examples of that, shouldn't we be reinforcing that? If we're talking about employee recognition, shouldn't we be tying that back to the core values? Because that is part of the culture of who we are. So
Yeah.
just trying, tying it back to a little bit of the components of HR pieces, elements of how do we say that and do that in some of our daily activities, because it's an everybody kind of thing. So
It
for what
is.
it's
It is.
worth. So
And
Trudy's question, oh, go ahead.
you kind of, and I'll answer Trudy's question ish and maybe need some more clarity, but that's actually the A
Oh,
component is assess. Where are we? Where
okay.
are we? And finding, putting language tools, a grading system around this is what we say we stand for. How are we actually doing it? Examples. So Trudy, to your point, values conflict. Values conflict is really interesting. Actually, I just went to a Tony Robbins event, and he talks a lot about stagnation, personal stagnation, because he's obviously very much in the personal development space, but personal stagnation often having to do with values conflict. And so you can have a company values conflict. The first thing I think you need to do, and if you're wanting to share what values you think are in conflict, that might help this be a little bit more specific as opposed to general. But the first thing is to Deborah's point previously, we want to look at where an example we're seeing that values conflict, because maybe we just kind of like misidentified something. Maybe we say we value trust, and one person is valuing trust for the customer. I'm going to trust that the customer, if they're coming to us with a problem, it's genuine, and we need to always do right. In order to build trust with the customer, it needs to look like this. But another person hears trust and they're thinking, trust means taking care of our people, like loyalty, and so what's happening is you've got maybe two people taking the same value, but through their lens it looks different. To this person it looks like a customer facing value, to this person it looks like an internal facing value. So we do need specifics, and we do need language and a conversation around where we're seeing that values conflict. Have we either misidentified it, or have we through our own lens maybe faced that value in a slightly different direction as the other person? I wish I had this slide. There's a really cool slide. It looks like it's a corner of a room, and it looks like, imagine a soup can on its side, and maybe some of you have seen this, and now imagine a light shining a shadow. Now, if the light is shining the shadow on the round, top to bottom portion of the soup can, you're going to get a sphere shadow. But if the light is shining on the label side of the soup can, you're actually going to get a rectangle shadow. And I love this as an illustration of how two people can be quote unquote right around if the soup can was the problem, if you will, and yet one is swearing it's round and one is swearing it's rectangular. And so I think
Sure.
sometimes values can fall into that space that we're seeing the soup can shadow. But we do need to have conversations. Crucial Conversations is a great book. We do need to have conversations about what really do we value, because if there is a conflict, we will stagnate, because we'll hit an impasse, and we have to start to look at, what is our hierarchy here? What is the thing above all else that we stand for? For example, if we, an organization that stands for profit above all else is
Right.
going to look very different than an organization that stands for taking care of employees above all else.
Right.
And they
Well,
might still have the same profit goals, but the values are so different. I know those are extreme examples, but.
right. Well, and to your point with the soup can, I also think about that as how are we defining words? Your definition versus my definition. And so that can be an element of how we might view things. And Trudy weighs in. They're a health care organization, humanitarian health not-for-profit organization. So that the value of being responsive in emergencies often result in a significant impact on employees. So probably the value about that responsiveness is also we've got to go now, but it also is high burnout for people in terms of the high degree of now, how many people go. I'm guessing there's not been any shortage of emergencies of late. So,
and true, that's a bigger conversation of which I would challenge you to run point on about what are the consequences of a particular value playing out to the nth degree, and how can we still hold a value while still honoring another value? How can we still hold responsiveness while not putting undue stress on employees? Because frankly, if it creates undue stress to the point that maybe we have high turnover, now we don't have people to serve and be responsive. And so we've actually made our responsiveness problem even worse by holding the responsiveness value so much higher. And I'm not presupposing that's exactly your situation, but I'm giving an example how that really needs to be a roundtable discussion with all the people that have a dog in the fight on responsiveness versus employees. The cost of turnover, for example, would severely impact responsiveness, because now if we're devoting all this extra energy to training and hiring, bringing people on, training, and it's very hard to live that value in the first place. So that's a bigger conversation. And I'll invite all of you, if anybody would like to have a conversation about the work that we do with organizations, I'm happy to have that offline or even just chat. I'll put all these up at once just so we can kind of keep the conversation rolling. But some different tools that you can use to assess: good old-fashioned SWOT analysis. You've probably heard of SWOT before, maybe you haven't, but it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. It's old as time. I mean, I don't even know who first coined the term. I don't even know it's old, but it is a goodie. It's an oldie but a goodie. It is a classic. It's that classic song that you want to hear turned all the way up every time. It is such an easy way to get all the lenses from all the different vantage points. Every leader filling out hey, what do you think are our strengths and our values, our weaknesses, our opportunities and threats? What are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and how we're living them out, right? Just getting people to get a dialogue going. SWOT is amazing. Surveys. I love surveys. There's a few different ways to do surveys. Anonymous gets, you get the ugly when you get anonymous. You also have to take it with a grain of salt, because chat forum, internet keyboard warriors, people also feel like they can say everything, but you will get some things that people may not say if their name is attached to it. And so I actually, or when I work with clients, usually I'm advising them to do both kinds and have a variety, because it's kind of like in the Olympics when they take the highest and lowest score out anyway. Different kinds of surveys yield different results. Town halls and roundtables. I was just participating in a LinkedIn forum today about employee engagement and how important it is to bring in think of what you all get to do in terms of Undercover Boss. If you've ever watched the show Undercover Boss, we want to hear from people in the organization, which actually also leads me to my shadow point down there, but bringing people together. Hey, here's a variety of different departments together. We want your input on how we can improve culture. What do you want to see? What do you think we do great at? Where do you think we can do better? What ideas do you have for us that you feel like have fallen on deaf ears? And then the last one, shadowing. I cannot stress this enough. And it is every client that I've ever helped implement a shadow program has thanked us profusely, because it took a little, oftentimes cajoling to do it. But what they learned, again, think undercover boss, except you don't have to get a mustache and shave your head. But what they learned from just being with someone for a half a day was immeasurable compared to what you get just by simply asking a question. Now, certainly ask the questions, right? That's the previous, ask the questions. But just talking to a department head or a particular department going, I just want to observe you guys and see what I can see. I want to learn from you. I'm not here to micromanage. That's a big buzzword people hate. I'm here to learn from you. I'm here to be a fly on the wall, seeing what you experience every day. Because part of my role and part of my passion is to help you thrive here and to give you the tools to be successful and to see what's working and to see what's not working and to listen. And so shadowing, man, if you can shadow even your other department leaders to get a better understanding of them, it is massive. So these are some of the tools, as well as, Deborah, I appreciate your input. These, and I actually have a button on this next, but including them in our goals, in our reviews, in how do we assess all the way down to the granular, high level, all the way down to boots on the ground. Any thoughts? So I can stay on this slide, but any thoughts?
So on your SWOT, what would you, so we have two questions. Elizabeth is asking, what would you include in the SWOT? So when we think about strengths, obviously I believe one of the elements is, what's the strengths of the organization? What does that look like? And what are the weaknesses of and accomplishments, right? And some of that could be like recognized from the community or recognized in the industry. Those could be things that are the strengths, right? And weaknesses, I'm going to say the words confront reality. Be honest about where are you in terms of the competition? Where are you in terms of the hiring? Where are we losing people, or how or why are we losing people? When we think about weakness of the culture, are we intentional about what we're doing? I still remember my friend Lori Rowe, and this was decades ago. She works for a credit union. And when she told me at the time what her title was, I was like, tell me more about that. We were on a bus ride, and it was a SHRM chapter event. And we were, killing time. And I said, I don't think I know what that means, because this was like 20 some odd years ago. And she basically, part of her job was to keep the culture alive. And she goes, Deborah, I am amazed at how much work it takes to maintain the culture that we want, because one person can help it and one person can kill it. And so what are those areas that are challenging? But I think one of the things that maybe Elizabeth may or may not be asking about is when we think about opportunities and threats, when she says, what would you include in the SWOT? Are there certain things that you definitely coach your clients on in those areas to make sure you include that we might not think about?
So the best way, in my humble opinion, for a SWOT is, you can do a broad organizational SWOT, but that's almost so big. It's like our brain actually, so much is so little is held in our conscious, so much is held in our subconscious, that if we can zoom it in a little, we actually get better data. So I would encourage you to do SWOT on specific things. So let's say the specific in this instance is our culture. Then let's pull up our mission statement. What do we say we stand for? Let's pull up our vision statement. What do we say we're trying to accomplish? Let's pull up the values that we paid some consulting firm, 50 grand to help us write. And let's hand these out, and let's go through one by one and go, hey, which ones of these would we give ourselves, like on a 10-point scale, an 8, 9, or 10? Why? Going back to, Deborah, what you said previously, like examples. Which one of these are we anything less, like a 7 or less? Why? And that's how I would go through. What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Where do we have opportunities to get better? So let's say, so for example, one of our company values is to eradicate the gossip triangle. So the gossip triangles, I have a problem with Deborah, but instead of telling Deborah and going to talk to Deborah about the issue that I have, I go to Jay and I go, man, that Deborah, man, she just is, she's, you know, blah, 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 and this and that. And then Jay wanting to either relate to me or make me feel better. And if you can reference the Karpman drama triangle, if you've not heard of that, and I hope you all have, because it's amazing. But Jay either wanting to rescue Deborah or wanting to like sort of be on, you know, my team. So she's wanting to rescue one of us, me or Deborah. She goes, yeah, she did the same thing to me last week. And, or she goes, Deborah's not that bad. Like, you really, you know, and anyway, so Jay goes into rescue mode. Okay. So that is what we refer to as the gossip triangle now taking place, because I failed and went to Jay instead of going to Deborah and saying, hey, Deborah, we need to talk. I'm feeling a little frustrated. So in the SWOT, I would say, hey, an opportunity for us is to really teach our team about the gossip triangle and really empower everybody on what to say if we feel like we're seeing the gossip triangle start to play out. So that'd be an opportunity. A threat, kind of stick with this whole gossip thing, is, hey, you know, we had to let go that person a couple weeks back, and I am just hearing tons of chatter that people are concerned that they might be out of a job, or these people are saying it's because of this, that, and the other thing. We need to get a handle on how we protect, you know, anonymity or confidentiality, but also give people the confidence that their jobs aren't in jeopardy.
Right.
So those might be examples, but the whole point being that you're using your values or the culture that you said you wanted as the framework to go through strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You can use SWOT. You could have the leadership team. Let's go through SWOT on just our financials. Let's go through SWOT on how our operational systems are going. You can literally use SWOT for any micro or macro thing, but the aim is to be specific enough that people's minds don't go, you know, A to Z, but maybe we focus it on kind of A, B, and C. I hope that helps. And I know if anybody does, again, want to chat with me after, I would love to give, you know, if you have a specific situation, you know, that I'm happy to talk more at length.
So there's a second question.
Okay, go on.
Structured or open-ended questions when it comes to town halls and roundtables?
Both. They give you different data. Okay, so just like we want anonymous surveys and public, you know, or email surveys, you get different information. So an open-ended question might be, you know, how can our culture improve? But a more structured question is, we say we value eradicating the gossip triangle. What specifically do you feel like we can do to get better at that? Or what is a specific cultural value that you don't feel like we're presently living to the best of our abilities? So you're going to get different information. And I'll use an example. If you recall, kind of old school, I'll date myself a little here. I used to sell advertising, and do you remember the Nielsen ratings, like the TV, and then the Arbitron for radio, Nielsen and Arbitron radio? So back in the day, they used to give you a journal. Before they had the fancy, like, attach it to your device, they give you a journal. And they would say, Deborah, as you watch TV this week, write down everything that you watch, because we want data for our advertisers to say that 31 million people saw this show.
Right.
Then what they would do is they would go in after the fact and they'd say, Deborah, what ads did you see? And she'd go, I don't know. I mean, I think I saw something for like Ford trucks, and I think I saw, you know, so-and-so, like Remax. And then they go, but did you see anything for like Coke or Pepsi? Or did you see anything for any soda companies? So they would first ask you unaided, and then they would ask you aided, and they would get different information. So again, we're not all that different, right? You're information seeking in the same way that Nielsen and Arbitron are. And so you want to ask, you know, if we're going back to the soup can analogy, you want to be walking all the way around that soup can, asking all the different ways so that you can catch all the data. And not just that it's round and not just that it's rectangle, but actually, hey, this thing is a cylindrical prism. What's that? But anyway, you get my point. So
Yes.
hopefully that helps. All the things. But you don't also want your forms to be like, 47 pages long. So you might have like a quarterly process
Right.
where you kind of shake up how you're doing. And this is where really good systems comes into play. So daily culture creation is also predicated and kind of rises and falls on our systems. But I also want to reassure you, it does not have to be overly complicated. It does not have to be a simple Google form might work. There are some things that we can do to really keep it simple. Perfection is the enemy of action.
Yeah.
So if you are trying to make this thing like perfect and oh my gosh, I got to have everything and I got to have it exact, just start. Just start and then commit to tweaking as you keep doing it. With me on that, hopefully?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So in identify, so we have to decide the values, the culture we want. We have to assess where we currently are in relation to those values and principles and whatnot. Now we have to identify what specifically is it going to take us as a company to achieve that. What are the controllables? What are the activities? What are the behaviors? So one of the first things is ownership. And ownership is for everyone on this call, Zoom. It's for everyone on the leadership team. Ownership really has to, if you've read the Malcolm Gladwell book, The Tipping Point, it really does need a tipping point. So that's sort of bad news, good news, because you can, if you're like a one person band, like let's say you just feel like you're swimming upstream in your organization, like I really want this, but nobody feels like they're on my side. There are still things that you can do. You can get early adopters. I would challenge you to read The Tipping Point Act if you're feeling like you're in that boat. But we really do need some critical mass because again, this can't happen by accident. So how can we get people that want to take ownership? I'll give an example in our organization. So we are mostly 1099s. We have very few employees in Southwestern Consulting. We are lion's share 1099s. So we frankly don't have to, if you hear the common 1099, objection, we don't have to do anything. I don't have a time that I have to be at work in the morning. I don't have but we have one of our coaches, her name is Tej, she's amazing. And she became really passionate about employee engagement. And she took ownership to say, I'm going to actually create a program that helps measure our coaches' engagement and helps them become more engaged if we see that they're maybe pulling back a little. She had so much ownership. She had no financial reason to do that, but she's just extraordinarily passionate about what she does. Now, you might be saying, Marge, what do I do if I don't have those people on my team? Sometimes we have to be that person. Other times we just have to find who has a little flicker burning inside of them to be a bigger contributor than they currently are. And let's tipping point, bring them on as early adopters and help curate and kind of fan that flame a little so that they do feel inspired and committed to take ownership. Hiring practices. You all are very involved in this, but if you don't have something related to your values that is a significant part of your interview process, then I would challenge you. That's one of the first places we can go, is because oftentimes people get hired on their hard skill resumes, but they will get fired on soft skills, right? They will get fired on lack of emotional intelligence. They will get let go because they are a bull in a china shop and nobody likes to be around them, right? They will get fired on all the other stuff, even though we looked at their resume and they're like, full. So we have to start incorporating values into our hiring process. The first step is to make sure everybody knows what they are. The second process is to continue to be bringing them up on a regular basis. I know I'm overlapping with some other things that I've been saying, but bringing them up. If the only time you hear about your company's values is the day you were hired, or even if then, even not, maybe not even then we've got a culture problem because people can't live what isn't even on their radar. People can't live what's not on the radar. So we have to incorporate it into hiring practices. Then we have to keep nurturing it. So celebrate wins. How can we encourage all of leadership and ultimately everybody in the company to catch people doing things right, particularly as it pertains to our cultural values? Like, hey, I just want to thank you for, coming to me with that and not participating in the gossip triangle, even if that feedback stung a little and maybe they were super awkward about it and terrible about it. If we value eradicating the gossip triangle, thank you for that. Or, hey, I hear what you're saying and I can tell you're frustrated. You really need to go talk to so-and-so about it. How can I help you with that? So we've got to keep nurturing and catching people doing things right. And the other piece is have fun doing it. How can we have fun living our values? What are our values that we can incorporate fun things into? We are with these people, even if we're virtually with them. We do work just about more than any other thing that we do. For most of us, probably significantly more. I think I work more than I see my husband, and I love my family. But and you guys probably all relate. So we better be finding ways to identify opportunities to have fun, to celebrate, to catch people doing things right, to have fun and having ownership, to praise initiative, so on and so forth. I'll pause there before going to the next, the L. Any thoughts on identifying actions we can take to move culture forward intentionally? The identify also comes in terms of the performance reviews and ongoing meetings and things. All right, lead. We have a room full of leaders. We have a room full of leaders here. Leadership is funny. We can have a leadership title. Have you ever seen someone in an organization that maybe didn't have a title, and yet people were following them, good, bad, or otherwise? So leadership doesn't necessarily have to have a fancy title. We can lead in a lot of ways, in the same way that I referenced that a colleague of mine. Now she does have a leadership title, but she wasn't the apex of the organization by any means. So one of the things with leadership is we need to lead from the front, if you've heard that saying. We need to be practitioners first. As the curators of culture in our organization, we need to be making sure and really in hopefully a positive way, living under a microscope, in that our culture rises and falls with us. So I'm never going to ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do. So again, to just reference that gossip triangle, I better be dang sure that I'm not going to somebody else that I want to, somebody else that isn't the person I have a problem with, if I'm leading on eradicating the gossip triangle. Now we're human. So on the flip side, we also want to extend grace. But I have to, as a leader by both title and in just in the fact of being, it's like I need to really own being a practitioner. And we can actually teach people at every level of the organization to lead by example, to be practitioners. We also say you can't teach what you don't know, and you can't lead where you won't go. So I'll keep kind of running this theme through. Let's say, who was I talking to? One of my clients said, confrontation is really hard for me. It was like this blanket negative statement about confrontation. The reason this problem has exacerbated, it was a particular employee. She's the wife and other head of the company, and there's an employee that doesn't want to talk to her, but only wants to talk to the husband, and it's a little bit messy, icky. And she goes, but I just don't like confrontation. And so we had to kind of go, and we had to dismantle, like, there are limiting beliefs. Now, every human has some degree of limiting beliefs. So in terms of leading, we also have to kind of look inward. What are our limiting beliefs around our role? What are our limiting beliefs? Maybe that a little bit conflict with some of the culture things. What are the limiting beliefs that we might have around being the absolute best leader we do have? A limiting belief doesn't mean that there's not some truth to it somewhere. There absolutely can be some truth. A limiting belief, though, means we've decided it's fixed, as opposed to looking for what we can do about it. Another good book on this is Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck. If you've never read Mindset, it's a doozy. It's an amazing, amazing book. But really taking ownership, which you saw as a previous bullet point, that if we're eradicating the gossip triangle, that I have to be willing to confront people that I'm frustrated with. I have to be willing to dismantle my limiting beliefs if I'm ever going to encourage a team member to have a conversation with someone that they disagree with in that instance? Or what are my limiting beliefs? Let's say in, the values conflict that we talked about before. How can I lead from the front on having a conversation, starting a conversation about, hey, I think we have two values that are both very important, but in some situations they butt up against each other. And I think we need to have an honest, real conversation about how we deal with that and what are the pros and cons of the current situation and how can we maybe make it better. That's an example of leading from the front. Accountability and personal conferences. I am in a high accountability profession. Both internally, our organization believes in high accountability, and we all have high accountability. But I also am paid money to hold other people accountable who say, hey, I could use a little more accountability in my leadership and in my performance. Don't ever let anybody tell you that accountability is a four-letter word. Accountability is not micromanagement. Micromanagement is me pushing something on you that you never signed up for. Accountability is me holding you accountable to A, what you said you wanted, or B, what you agreed to do. And so if you're getting pushback on accountability, that's an opportunity to have a very real conversation about the definitions of accountability. That's a very real conversation to set the tone of why we're doing what we're doing. So we're big believers and promoters on personal conferences. They could be weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly meetings with anybody that reports to you and anybody that you report to, where it's a one-on-one conversation, essentially a mini State of the Union. What's going well? What's getting in your way? Almost like a mini SWOT analysis, right? What's going well? What's getting in your way? What can we do about it? How can I support you? What are we committing to take action on between now and when we talk next? Awesome, let's go. But this is a beautiful thing because this prevents any annual review from ever being a surprise. So if you've ever had an employee surprised at the results of their annual review, then that is a huge, that we're not having proactive meetings with our team members, the people that report to them. Now, HR, this does not fall only on you. The leadership is that we bring these ideas to people and we help them see the value in them. But maybe personal conferences with heads of departments so that you can help them with their, challenges with their people and supporting their people. But personal conferences are, again, I've never had somebody start this and go, okay, Marge, I'm going to start this, but if I'm going to stop it as soon as it's not working and stop them. Nobody ever starts this the right way and stops them. And if we present them the right way, people do enjoy it because it's like, if we're leading, like drive-by leadership is what we call the other way. So personal conferences, proactive leadership and accountability. Drive-by leadership is come to me if there's a problem. Guess what? We're only talking to people when there's a problem. And how does that work for relationships? Imagine if your spouse only talked to you when there's a problem. It's not a very great relationship. So part of culture is relationships, and part of relationships are let's work together to head problems off at the pass, to have a ton of fun. So I know I'm rattling a lot of stuff up at you. And then the last thing is another saying we use very frequently at Southwestern Consulting, which is your people, your team, your organization, anybody that reports to you, anybody that sees you as a leader, they will do half what you do right and twice what you do wrong. Half what you do right and twice your kids, right? If you've ever had small children, it's like you say one bad word and man, where did that come from? Same idea. So we are always, someone is always watching. And I don't say that in a negative way, but it is on us. Anybody that has a leadership position, anybody that wants a leadership position, it is on us to elevate our game because there is somebody watching and they're going to emulate what we do. And generally they're going to emulate the bad stuff twice as much and they're going to emulate the good stuff half as much. So we better make sure that that good stuff is seriously outnumbered. And yet still give grace because we're all human, right? Nobody's perfect. But any additional thoughts or questions on leading from the front, leading by example?
Well, I will just share that Jane put in the chat box that one of the interview questions that she asks is about in the interview about values is tell us which one you most relate to and why.
And why?
And that would also suggest that they've done their homework and they pay attention.
Yes. I love that you ask the and why, because it's really easy for someone to say, I love that you're all practitioners. I love that you value hearing feedback from your employees, but when they can tell you the and why, and when they can give you a story,
Yeah.
it tends to cut through the BS, so to speak, that they're just telling us what they think that we want to hear.
Yep.
So ideally, if they can tell us a story of how they live it as well, that gives us a little more fuel to make sure that they really are.
Yes. And you'll need to do this one quickly. We're running out of time.
Okay. So our last 4 is to yank. So yank the culture cancers. We need to candidly, kindly, and consistently confront underperformers. Now, this is related to culture specifically, but it is also related to any aspect of the business. So I would challenge a couple books that I love on this are Ideal Team Player and Crucial Conversations. Ideal Team Player and Crucial Conversations. There's also Boundaries for the Workplace. So those are great books on candid, kind, and consistent confrontation of people that are pushing those buttons. The next piece is there are times that we need to cut out the bad apples. Now, this is, of course, after they've been candidly and kindly confronted, they've been given a chance to change, they've been given the guidance and tools to change. But if they have been given those things all in good faith and nothing has changed, then it is much better to let a performer who is cancerous in terms of culture or attitude go than to retain them and let them poison the bunch. I got stories for days on that one. Eliminate practices that aren't in alignment with cultural values. If we say we value our employees above all else, and yet we run competitions that are some way demeaning to somebody, or we tell, sarcastic jokes, oh, but I'm just kidding, right? We're now in misalignment there. We've got to catch those things. And then we need to be continuously refining and reevaluating. 1, are we living our culture? Are we living our values? Are we living the things we say? And 2, are these still the things that we really stand for and want to stand for and want to continue to build that we stand for? So we have to continuously, we're always looking at that. Not to say we should be changing our values every quarter, but it is okay to recognize, like, in the values conflict scenario, that, hey, this thing that we said, we actually kind of had a misorder, or we had them misdefined. It is okay to refine and redefine in order to get it right. Because at the end of the day, y'all, culture isn't an accident. It needs to be a daily practice. We need to ultimately define, assess. Whoops, here's my little slides. Define, assess. Why aren't we going? There we go. Identify, lead. And then in some cases, yank when necessary. I want to say thank you. Here is my contact information. Screenshot it if you would like to reach me. I can also send, if anybody wants to text me, if they would like a few minutes with me, I can text you back a Calendly link that you can find a time that works on my schedule if you want to have a more in-depth conversation around any of these things. More than anything, I just really appreciate your contribution and being here for this session. I hope that you all had a takeaway, and I'm willing to stay a little longer if anyone else is, about what stuck out the most or what additional questions you have. So I don't have to go anywhere, even if the recording has to stop. But thank you, and thank you.
Wow. 3 thank yous in there, and you're getting thank yous in the chat box as well. So, and you'll get one more from me. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and your thoughts, because actually some of these are different than I've had around the conversation in terms of culture inside an organization. And one of the things that I will add to the conversation here is, from an employee perspective, I'm consciously aware of thinking about the employee experience and what are they what's happening to them each and every day makes up their thought process. So when you think about those town halls and the round tables, that's what they're going to come up with. That's what they're going to express to us. And so are we thinking about those in terms of, back to your SWOT analysis, what is it that they're experiencing? What are those moments that are kind of, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equals, those moments add step, and they're going to share that in those surveys, share that in some fashion. And are we being intentional about those moments? And are we thoughtful? Are we listening to the feedback that they're providing us so that we can have the kind of ongoing culture on purpose that we want to have to attract people, retain people, that people enjoy coming to work? If we spend the majority of our waking hours in some fashion from a work standpoint, and it's a good balance, we want people to be happy doing good stuff in terms of work. And we can make that a reality. It is an all of us kind of effort. And so those moments matter. And we, all of us, every single person inside the organization can contribute. And so I really like having nothing to do really with our conversation per se, personal conferences, because I talk about one-on-ones all the time, and I like having some new vocabulary. So Marjorie, thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
We appreciate that. And so we will call it officially a done deal. People can stick around. Please feel free. We love to chat afterwards. Our next HR Lunch Bunch will be on May 3rd. And we're torn between two topics because I've got two things slated, and so you're just going to have to stay tuned to your emails, to Facebook, to LinkedIn, to HR Answers flyers, emails, newsletters, website for what the topic is going to be. I either will lead it myself or I'll have a guest, because the guest has been on an extended vacation and hasn't confirmed 100%. So I believe they come back next week. So we'll see what's going to happen. So stay tuned. It's a mystery to all of us, or well, at least to most of you. I know at least what my topic will be if I'm doing it. So I'm glad that you came. I'm glad that you joined. And those of you who are new, thanks for coming and joining us. We love having you, and we hope we see you again in the future. We'll officially call this one done in the books. Thanks again for joining HR Lunch Bunch. Take care. Now all I have to do is find my little buttons. There they are. They disappeared behind the screen share. Yes, Deborah, find your button.
Hit escape, maybe?
No, I just got to find my, there we go.
Through the magic